All right, let's get started. I'm Jonathan. I SVP of BD and Partnership at the TIE. Very happy to be joined by a group panel of senior marketers at leading protocols in the space. I think we're going to spend some time talking about tactics and metrics that's going to be driving marketing strategies for crypto native protocols. So I think on a high level, qualitatively, there are so many like marketing strategies you can deploy as a senior marketers, and you always have to kind of balancing between short-term and long-term marketing strategies, and also having quantitative data to help along with that could be super helpful. So would love to learn a lot from insights from all the panelists that's found with me today. So I think to start off, maybe let's self-introduce ourselves a little bit, your background, what your project is working on. So maybe who wants to start? Shazia? Yeah.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Shazia. I lead marketing at Pip Labs. We're the creators of Story Protocol. It's a purpose-built L1 focused on tokenizing making ID programmable. Prior to that, I led marketing efforts at Matter Labs, the creators of ZK Sync. So been in this space for about 4 years, a mix of marketing and comms. So yeah, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, my name is Jay. I am the CMO at Eco. We are focusing on stablecoin infrastructure. So simply put, we are trying to make it easy for any on-chain apps to accept stablecoins, regardless of what network or what asset type. So just streamlining the user experience. Before that, I was head of marketing at Avalanche. So I was working with this guy actually. So we worked pretty closely. So a lot of the stuff might overlap there. And I've been in the space for a little bit in marketing capacity. So excited to just share. For the most part, I think I've been focused on developers and also on the retail side as well. So I feel like it's pretty topical to some of the topics that were talked about before, but also some of the stuff that we'll talk about on this session.
Thanks. I'm Kyle Dineen. I run content and for Avalanche, so for the Avalanche blockchain network and all of our policy stuff. So yeah, really excited to be on the panel today. Good to be with you two and talking about this stuff today. So
yeah. I think my first question is, I think all the panelists have a combination background, like experience both in Web2 and Web3 marketing. One thing I'm very curious about from your perspective is what are some of the key differences when we approach Web3 marketing versus Web2? And what are some of the unique challenges as a Web3 marketer that we're facing right now?
I guess I'll start. So as someone who has a extensive Web2 background and came from a entertainment creative agency for like 10 years. There's some stuff that overlaps, but there's a lot of things that are different in terms of strategies and tactics. I do think that there's a lot of benefit to having a Web2 marketing background to know how kind of like processes and executions work and being able to set up systems and teams in a way that you can like scale and optimize. And because the crypto industry is so new that there aren't a lot of like best practices or things that always work or ways to do things. So you have to kind of like build it yourself. I think the biggest challenge is attribution. So like the idea that so much happens anonymously and that you can't really treat, it depends on what products you have. And, obviously as a decentralized network that is pretty much the infrastructure layer for apps to build upon, we don't have, there's no sign up for Avalanche. There's no Avalanche account. So we're driving people to use the applications. And so the attribution gets a little bit murky. And so you have to kind of find new ways to be able to attribute what you're doing to certain results. When in traditional Web2 marketing, the funnel is very much more clear. Like you get down to like very specific actions that people take. Whereas you're driving awareness to applications or you're driving awareness for developers, it's a little bit easier because you can get them to sign up and do things. But I think the attribution part's a little tough. You just have to get like layer.
That makes sense. I think writing on that a little bit, but changing it from a different angle is and I'm not biased by saying this. I think marketing in Web3 is one of the hardest jobs. Full stop. Why? Because what Kyle said when it comes to the attribution funnel, you kind of have to make certain guesses. You kind of have to use proxies. So by proxies, let's say you do off-chain data. Well, you'll find that trail pretty clearly, but then once it goes on-chain, there's a clear gap on how to connect those two dots. And so even when we were at Ava Labs working on the TIE platform, we were actually trying to triangulate that as best as possible. And I think that's okay, actually. But just to be like very, very kind of understanding that that's the case. And then when you're actually experimenting with some of the strategies, you're not actually like taking the kind of loose attribution as gospel and then actually having a little bit of flexibility there. And then just riding on the original point of this profession being very, very difficult. It's because I believe that you have to have two clear skill sets. One side is full stack marketing. So you have to know digital marketing. If your company is much bigger, you have to go above the fold and you have to go to like out of home and all these other more traditional channels. If you're more developer focused, you have to kind of go the opposite way and go a little bit more niche. And so you need to have channel expertise and also need to know usually how to execute them because these teams are typically pretty elite. And then the other side, I think, is just knowledge of the industry. And that's what I think the previous panel touched on a little bit. You really have to know the ins and outs of everything that happens all the way from the ethos at the top level all the way down to the technology. And if you actually know that, then you guys should bring those two together and then start to market effectively. And not always is that going to be the right path forward. And so in that sense, you kind of have to be a subject matter expertise on two things with a lot of depth, but also be able to execute. It's this analogy I use for my team, and you probably heard it a lot when we work together. But if you know how the car is made, every single component, all the way down to the nuts and bolts, you will be able to sell it better because you know what not to bring forth and you know what to bring forth if it's actually a strong value prop. And I think that's really important for an industry like ours because we are making things as it goes. There is not really product market fit. There isn't really like a clear playbook yet. And so I think that flexibility is really important that you don't really see in Web2.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. As far as like the differences too of Web2 and Web3 marketing, is maybe a little controversial, but I also feel like they are very similar in many ways, and that's very discounted, especially when you think about the psychology of marketing and how you get people to buy into your mission, your journey, your product. They're very similar, but that where they differ and are more challenging, one piece is the attribution. I think another piece is just the audience fragmentation. So you would have in Web2 a traditional B2B SaaS company, right? So you're targeting businesses. And so you can say a B2B company within crypto, similar thing, but then all of a sudden you have a token. So then you're targeting businesses, but then you need to find a way to target consumers as well and get them interested. And then that makes the funnel a lot messier. So it's really more of a puzzle, I think, than a solid funnel, as you would think. You have to piece together all these various things to kind of like do ecosystem marketing in different areas to attract retail, but at the same time, track the base of your business, which is B2B.
Yeah, I totally agree. Crypto marketer is one of the hardest jobs out there because you not only need to know marketing, you need to be good with numbers, but also you need to be some sort of crypto native. You need to know what the developer or your community or teachers are doing, what do you care about. So another thing I think you guys talk about is like channel expertise. And Avalanche may be a little bit more general, but I think Jay and Shazia, you guys can be a little bit more focused with your product, right? Maybe you guys can share some perspective on what sort of channel is great for attracting what type of audiences, or maybe you can talk about your own channel strategies, your experience a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, I think it really differs and depends on who you're targeting. Just like I was talking about the different audiences. If it's developers, a lot of it's obviously Twitter, but there's things like Stack Overflow we've explored with, Reddit, things like that, in-person hackathons. And then with retail, Twitter, that's the main one. Especially with institutions, I would say LinkedIn more, but it's very general. And it really depends on the type of business that you're targeting. I would say our strategy, it's really fluent, and it all comes down to like, what is the priority for the business? What are we trying to secure? Who are we trying to reach to use our product? Because at the end of the day, I really see marketing as a support to drive business goals. So, I mean, if we're focusing on an enterprise vertical, then we're going to take a totally different approach. And if we're focusing, on crypto native, then we're going to focus more on Twitter. Right now at Story, we're doing a little bit of both. So similarly, it's kind of a puzzle that you put together, but it's something you also have to continuously measure and understands like where the business is and then map your channels based off that.
I think I'm going to merge two of the things that you said. So one of the previous points was Web2 versus Web3. It's actually not terribly different, but I think you just have to adapt a little bit. And when you talk about actual channels, I think the playbooks are correct and they're tried and true, but how do you actually adapt that to then your customer and what they're doing? And so kind of to take that further, something that I find really practical is be obsessive on your customer, like the Jeff Bezos kind of me. You got to like really push that part, really understand who they are, what makes them tick, what mediums they consume, what they don't like, all those things. And when you know that, you can actually start to create this really nice media mix, and you can create this customer trading, kind of taking something that probably all of us at agencies have done many, many times. And you start to map out basically kind of like a board game trail, so to speak. You start from, okay, well, if you're new to the industry, well, what's the first step you'll take? You might go to search and you might type in general blockchain terms and you might look at what those definitions might be. Well, that's not a content play right there, an upper funnel content play. Now, after that, they might discover, okay, well, L1s and L2s, here are the differences. But then who are the L1s and L2s? And maybe they might go to media companies to really understand what Avalanche, Arbitrum, all these chains are about. And so now you might need a PR media play to actually have that upper funnel exposure. Then as you go down, that's effectively what that funnel is if you actually go deeper. And then all the way at the end is whatever you define as conversion. And if you do that right, you have every single customer segment has its own funnel, and then you're able to then start to activate at each level of that funnel. And what works best once you're able to flight that all out is you look at the metrics. That's all it is. If there are metrics that are great on socials, well, then maybe your middle upper funnel strategy is humming really nicely. But then when you look at your email inbound and you have no signups, where there's some problem there, where from the moment your customer goes from social all the way down to, let's say, your website to capture, to submit their emails, or maybe a form or like a piece of content that they want to consume because you wrote a white paper or something, you can start to diagnose it bit by bit. And I think that's what every single company in our industry is going through right now. They're trying to figure out the V1 system or V1 funnel and then iterating. Where I think my criticism comes in, where people maybe don't go all the way to the end, is they kind of stop. They might not even actually map the funnel, number one. But number two is they just start to do activations for activation's sake. And so now you have this basically disparate funnel where it doesn't really exist, and then you actually don't know how to triangulate your successes or problems. And then I think that's where you start to get stuck, and your socials might be growing steadily, but nothing else is growing. And I think that's what you're seeing still in the industry a little bit.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off what Jay was saying, for us at Avalanche, we obviously have a little bit different challenge because, we're talking to a lot of public, right? Like, as a network that has everything built on top of it, there's certain channels that, of course, reach different audiences, but the way I've kind of built it out recently, and our team is kind of structured around this, is we don't take necessarily a certain platform or channel approach, but we treat it all as individual programs. And so those programs are geared towards the user, like obsessing over the user, assessing over the audience. And the program is built around all the things that we want someone to do in that project. So, for example, we have builder programs. Yeah, maybe Twitter and Medic are the places that devs lay it, but builder programs is a certain way that we want either a developer to take a certain action, sign up to something, work on something, come to the network, and act die. But also founder support. So what grant programs are? We have an asset accelerator. We have like an innovation house that people go stay on for a few months and build. So we treat it all as like each of those programs are going to have multi-channel approaches. There's going to be a way that you treat Twitter for one of these programs. There's going to be a way you treat Twitter for another program. And so for us, that led to a lot of like build out of different channels. So you have like a gaming Twitter account, our encourage to account, the developer Twitter account. And we also have like different websites and landing pages and areas that people could go into, and then they kind of stay in that environment. So once you're in kind of our builder program funnel, then you're in a whole different web environment where you're learning about the upcoming hackathons, programs you can apply for, different ways that investors are meeting founders, things like that. And then for like, general users, we do things to identify early on, like, are you interested in gaming? Well, if you're interested in gaming, there's a whole different space than most other entrepreneurs, right? They're not really around necessarily for like, you're not like just a maxi on a certain chain. You're like, play good games, you potentially want to earn while doing so. But like, Twitter's not really the place where like these just hardcore gamers are hanging out. It's all the influential people in the KOLs and stuff talking about gaming. But if you're a game studio dev, you don't want to know about all this other stuff. So we put you in a different environment where you're seeing demos and doing streams and things like this. So you treat it less of a channel by channel approach and more of a audience program.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I think there are so many options and channels with different type of audiences. You guys are balancing the whole time with a small team, right? Sometimes you have to prioritize which channel is doing better versus the other. You have to calibrate in a real time with the team's resources. So I wanted to kind of dive a level deeper on what you guys just talk about on channels, because as a marketing professional and lead at a team, you need to use quantitative metrics to measure if certain channel is working well, if certain strategy is working well. In Kyle, you mentioned the gap between the Web2 traceability, and all of a sudden in Web3, you have to use a whole set of different kind of metrics to measure effectiveness of your strategies, right? Can you guys share a little bit of experience about what sort of quantitative metrics that you find useful, you frequently use on your daily activities, and maybe I think the audience can learn a lot from those. So, I think like high level is can exist across any channels, but engagement I think is really useful. I think the vanity metrics like followers and impressions, like they're good signal, but I think the industry kind of overemphasizes those metrics a little bit too much, right? Like, I hear often from founders like, oh, we should double the Twitter count, and we should double the LinkedIn count. It's like, well, fortunately, the product isn't out yet, and there's nothing actually materially to talk about. So how am I going to get from 50K to 100K? I have no idea, right? Or 10K to 20K. So I think it's more about a holistic view there, and just making sure that if we're working closely with product teams, BD teams, you just gotta make sure that the business objectives are realistic. And then again, what was mentioned earlier, the marketing is actually going to enable and accelerate that faster. And it's not really the other way around, which I think sometimes in crypto, you get to that expectation. But I think the other thing that is starting to grow in popularity is what I mentioned earlier is the on-chain metrics. How do you actually look at that, and how do you actually then set your OKRs, KPIs, however you want to measure it, to then establish kind of alignment towards your business goals? And so for on-chain, I'm more talking Avalanche stuff actually, so maybe I'm stealing Kyle's thunder a little bit. But at Avalanche, we were looking at like active developers, active contracts deployed, or a number of contracts deployed, how many users or active wallets that were there, and then really understanding, hey, when we're actually launching fully fledged campaigns, is there actually a correlation to that campaign and on-chain activity or not? Same thing with like exchange inflows, outflows. That's further if you have like a token live, I think is also interesting to look at. Again, like not something to hold fully, kind of fully as like the gospel and as an accurate kind of measure, but I think it's really good signal. And then I think there's some platforms that are starting to come out. There's like Safari, Cookie 3, there's a bunch of like on-chain kind of focus. Kado's like another one. They're all trying to adapt what already actually exists in marketing, but more for us, I would say. And so I think there's usefulness, but I think there needs to be a little bit more, and I think everyone's trying to find that. So whoever actually figures that out first, where they can have either attribution end-to-end, better metrics than kind of the traditional stack gives you, like Sprout Social or whatever else. Or I think the third is something totally different on, not even on the marketing perspective, but more just on the on-chain side and actually marrying the two more accurately. I think whoever figures that out is going to actually have a really good timing.
I will say the one thing that I think's been helpful that kind of got figured out is Frosty Metrics. So Frosty Metrics is the ties platform that they built for Avalanche that measures and kind of quantifies on-chain activity and helps gauge like levels of how much people do certain activities in their wallets and stuff. And we actually use that for lots of other like co-marketing initiatives and stuff. So we have a big partnership coming out in about a month with a big sports entity, and they're trying to figure out the best way to like reward people that engage with the chain and with our content and stuff. And we kind of approached it originally of, you could do your typical, like, this is the Web 2, Web 3 comparison. Web 2, you would just put out something that's like a contest or a sweepstakes. You try to drive some sort of action, sign-ups to be entered to win. But we were actually going to be doing something based on Frosty Metric scores. So it's based on like on-chain activity and how much you do certain things for traditional, or for applications built on Avalanche that will also marry to social engagement metrics. So you'll participate in a campaign through those metrics, but you also have to that to on-chain activity. So I think that's pretty cool. Is just the ability to kind of like Jay was saying, find the correlations between something that you're seeing in a traditional metric, whether it's audience growth or the engagement metrics on social platforms, email metrics, and trying to marry that with other on-tree data that's coming out. And it's getting way more robust as we go along. And the other thing too is what we pay attention to a lot is the idea of something you do leading to another. So it's kind of hard to say like, oh, if your Twitter followers 2x, that actually leads to on-chain activity. But if you can focus on like creating content that leads to some other deeper form of content. So we know that if we're doing a bunch of fun engagement stuff on Twitter, that it's going to help the algorithm boost the other, maybe more corporate stuff. So you kind of try to correlate these two things together. Or if we're going to be doing a lot more like video clips, are we driving traffic to longer form YouTube videos so that we're driving viewership across, more deeper conversations? If we're making a bunch of great clips or we're doing a bunch of fun engagement stuff on Twitter, but it's not leading towards more views on the deeper content, it's not leading towards more engagement on the things that are going to actually help someone take action, then we know that there's something missing to Jay's point. There's a gap there. So you could take the vanity metrics and try to put them into correlating places so that you can see if what you're doing is leading to something that someone's actually going to take action on. Awesome.
Yeah, sure. I need to learn about Frosty metrics, number one. Sounds really interesting. I think the biggest challenge is the focus on vanity metrics and really weeding those out from your strategy and understanding like where there's quality engagement and just thinking more about quality versus quantity, because we're a really small space right now. So even having a small segment of your audience that's actually very engaged is very valuable. Because you can double your Twitter following, but at the end of the day, I mean, if half those people are bots, you're going to have nothing. And that, eventually the house of cards falls eventually. So like, you're really need to focus on engagement. I think that's a big one. On-chain tracking and metrics, that's huge. It's something we're starting to experiment with, but it's hard. Yeah, it is. It's been really tough to map it. But I think, with these new platforms, you are getting a little closer. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for the mention, Kyle. So yeah, with that way, I think the whole team is enjoy working with you guys on Frosty metrics. But yeah, I think the Thai is trying to, like you guys have mentioned, really bring all the on-chain, off-chain data into one platform and trying to find linkage between the two to build a gas. So if any of you guys want more information, that will be around, and I can share you more information on how we do that. One last question I want to ask you guys. Because the crypto circles changes every couple of months. There's a small circle. There's a bigger circle every couple 2 years. And with you guys probably getting a lot of pressure from our leadership team about, should we boost up some vanity metrics? The token price is dropping. Like, what can we do on the marketing side? But you guys also wanted to figure out, if I wanted to build a long-term sustainable brand image and narratives, right? Like, how do you guys balancing the short-term versus the long-term? And also, how do you guys balancing the Chinese circles of crypto market? And I mean, it's a pretty big question, but I think those are the type of problem you guys need to solve on a daily basis too. So I'm kind of curious about how you guys think about that spot. So the gut instinct that I got to when you said the first part of the question, which is more like when founders or just things get a little bit aggressive and you need to actually meet deadlines or you need to meet these goals, and they're maybe like short-term and tricks or like short-term shortcuts. If you remember in high school, you were taught no means no, or maybe it's college, but you just say no means no, and you just say that to your founders. No, I'm kidding. That actually doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Right.
Nah,
It doesn't work. But that's really what you want to say. But I think there's on the serious note, there's a way to actually balance what you want to do, but also kind of meet in the middle a little bit. And so usually most people in this industry are numbers oriented. We're in this industry for a reason. We're technically proficient, right? And so I kind of lean into that a lot. If you think about metrics and it goes, hey, well, actually that's an interesting idea, but we're actually running this campaign and here are already the metrics, but we could actually maybe like grow 10, 20, 30% if we keep going. But if we actually focus on this thing, we're not actually going to keep going here anymore. And so you can start to create these trade-offs a little bit. I mean, there's all these like kind of managing up tools. I'm not going to get into that, but I think that's like something that comes to mind. But on the other side, in terms of like being very present, honestly, it's I think the main thing that's helped is actually twofold. One is just being employed by a company. I know that sounds a little obvious, but you now have a vested interest to be really ingrained in that ecosystem. From 2020 to 2024, I was probably one of the leading experts on Avalanche, and that's not even a brag. That's just like obsessiveness of what we did, right? And prior to that, whatever company I was a part of. And I think the second part, which is easier said than done, is just meet people, help people out, collaborate. I think we've all met each other through calls or whatever else, and it's because of information sharing. When you start to share information, you actually understand what we actually all do right now is very different, but we all are employing similar tactics, but are talking to different audience segments, different maturity stages, all different types of variables. And so I think just collaborating with other people will get you sharp. Same thing. You have now somewhat of a vested interest to be engaged. I really don't think if you're not doing either event, you're just kind of sideline participant, in my opinion, and you're not going to really learn as much at the pace that you need to stay up to date with the pacing of the industry.
Yeah, I always go back to metrics, really, and hard data that says, what is going well and what isn't, because that really takes it out of, I feel it should be X way or Y way. Like similar, you're talking about how founders a lot of times will want like that short-term gain, but then you have to be able to show those trade-offs. I think another thing is that it's sometimes a blessing and a curse, but we are so close to our communities in crypto marketing. So like we can actually talk to our communities. Many times, like, you talk about product, you do user discovery, you can do the same thing in marketing. You can really start to understand what users are looking for and then match the short-term interests and the long-term interests together. I think the other thing is just really balancing it. I think you were saying, Kyle, like how a lot of times you're gonna mix more of the long-term content with like the fun, hit the engagement farmy type content. And then that way you're going to get visibility on both. And I think the onus is also really on us as marketers to show what those trade-offs are with the data and then try to balance it from there.
Yeah, what's really interesting, I think one of the things that I've noticed or we've noticed over the last couple of years is sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, less is more too, because I think that especially from our level, from the Ava Labs and Foundation level, there's times that if we try to hop on a narrative too much, or we try to put our hands on things too much, it actually makes things worse. So you have to like trust your community, and you have to like create ways that you can support what they're doing or what they're saying, or give your community a forum to like be the ones to like drive the narratives. And you have to stay nimble. So like we're very adept at trying to like stay nimble, even just like off of sentiment, right? Like it's not necessarily always about metrics, but as someone that ran our social accounts for a long time and oversees kind of the engagement side of things, there's many days where like we have a whole thing planned, and like 20 minutes before it's supposed to go up, you just kind of like scour Twitter, and you can just get a general sense of what people are saying. We'll be like, no, it's not the right day for that. Let's put that. Maybe it's too fun, or it's we need to be more fun. So you kind of have to like take metrics, but also like just be tapped, like you said, be tapped with the community, be like constantly paying attention to what people are doing, and then give them the tools. So like we have a big ambassador program. We have a bunch of different like bounties and things we do for people to create on their own. Because yeah, when you get in this like narrative chasing mode, a lot of times it could backfire, because, your team can only see it one way, but maybe there's a way that a narrative needs to shift like from the ground up, right? Especially around the super on-chain, crypto native stuff like meme coins, AI. A lot of these things, like you need to kind of just build from the ground up and then do what you can to build an infrastructure to support that. So if founders are coming and like, what we do to make the token price go up? Like, my thing is to use metrics as much as I can, but just try to like stay the course. Like, this is what we're really focused on right now, is just this like idea of staying the course. Yeah. And so
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that you guys are all like super focused on your community, really be a good listener and helper about what people are, the user experience aspect of it. I think it's really refreshing to hear. So we have time for just one question from an audience. Do anyone has any questions to ask?
Did that persist as what they were trying to help divide by that back into that before, like you talked about how it happens for the press.
Yeah, so I think one way that we actually played back at Ablab Soup is when community started to be used as a word in crypto. I think everyone thought about Telegram and Discord, but we all know that's not community, right? That's just 10,000 messages going through a feed in any given day. If you actually look at like B2B SaaS, or if you actually look at dev tooling from like a traditional sense, you can actually learn a lot from their strategies. And they built communities through platforms. They built communities through forums. These very useful tools that these developers can actually benefit from. One of the main things that they benefit from is they get support from peers, they get support from thought leadership, all those things, right? And so in terms of like measuring the developer community, and I think, you can kind of look at like deployed contracts. You kind of average out how many, developers or how many on-chain developers will be deploying certain contracts. That's like a decent proxy. I think it's better to just kind of measure it through your marketing initiatives. So the reason why I brought those platforms is it's a really easy way to count. You can actually just have how many registrants do you have on your forum, number one. But number two, you can actually look at the activity, who's actually conversing. You have ways to champion from a ranking perspective, so you can actually see who's highly engaged, who's not. And then I think you then have to set up conversion points for where your devs, where you want the devs to go, right? And so a few things we've done in the past, and I've done at Eco as well, is like tag where the repos are. So when anytime someone clicks them, how many times does a repo get downloaded in any given month? How many people look at the tutorial that goes, how do you launch, XYZ SDK from 0 to 1? Because that's obviously going towards conversion, and that's kind of like one step before that last step to go into that conversion funnel. I think last kind of idea I would mention is repeat this over and over with other types of platform, because the forum might not be the only place. That might be for highly engaged developers, for example. But maybe, at Apple Labs, what these guys are running these days is more of the ambassador programs at these developer boot camps. So there's also funnels that way. And so once you triangulate that, you can actually report that on a frequent cadence, like a quarterly cadence, let's say, and you can report back to your founders and say, hey, by the way, we have 3 different programs. We have about, 5,000, 10,000 active developers. We have about, 30,000 registered, but out of that, we have, 33% for whatever it is. So I think the triangulation is where I found the most success, and I just draw a funnel back all the way up to the top. Awesome. I really want to thank all of you guys for coming, and also all the panelists for sharing their perspective. And the next, we'll have a roundtable to dive into some of the more quantitative aspects that a lot of the panelists have shared, channels on how to use data to increase user acquisition and user retention strategies. So yeah, definitely don't leave. We have tons of content coming up. So yeah, thank you so much.